Hello, welcome back for part 2 as we look at the MV-22 Osprey from Miltech Simulations. In today's video we'll be looking at vertical takeoff and auto-hover, transitioning to flight, autopilot, short landings and takeoffs, urban flight and carrier landings. Now just a small disclaimer before we get started. I normally fly in VR and in previous flight videos I've recorded the actual footage from the replay. However, this didn't work for the Osprey because the replay didn't record the nacelle configuration. This meant I had to learn to fly using the good old conventional monitor.
You're joking.
I never joke about my work, 007.
Being a VR user, I don't have track IR, so I had to make do with webcam face tracking. It's not perfect, but it gets the job done. But why am I telling you all this? Well, it's largely an excuse for the mediocre flying. But enough of that, onwards and upwards. Before we get started, I'm going to turn on the moving map by pressing the nav button on the left MFD. If you like, you can change the orientation to heading, track or north up. I'm going to leave mine on track for now. Next, let's release the parking brake. You can do a vertical takeoff with the parking brake on, but it's good to have it off for when you land. Now we just smoothly increase the throttle. As soon as it's in the air, back off a tiny bit, not too much or you'll hit the deck again, but just like a micron or two. The throttle's pretty sensitive, so be delicate with it. If you can achieve a hover between 40 and 300 feet, the auto hover button will light up with the word ARM. Press it to engage the auto hover. This will then hold in one place, but you can still move up and down with the throttle. Just as long as you stay between 40 and 300 feet. Time to put the gear up. The auto hover will disengage automatically as soon as you try to move away from your current location. To start moving forward, you can either pitch like a helicopter, or you can start to lower the nacelles. It largely depends on what you're planning on doing next. We're going to transition to airplane flight, so I'm going to lower the nacelles and keep the aircraft itself fairly level. This isn't something you want to rush. You want to lower the nacelles at a rate which matches your airspeed. I find a good rule of thumb is to wait for it to start to climb with the airspeed and then lower the nacelles a little bit to compensate for the climb. As you get faster, you'll need to back off the throttle as well. In normal cruise, you should only need between 80 and 90% throttle. And remember, if it goes into yellow or red, you want to back out of it as soon as you can do safely. You really don't want an engine failure in this aircraft. Keep balancing the nacelle angle with the airspeed until you get the nacelles all the way down to 0. Now, from what I can tell, this aircraft uses two different flight models. One for when you're in helicopter mode, and the other for when you transition into airplane mode. It had to be done this way because Microsoft Flight Simulator wasn't really designed for this kind of aircraft. The fact they managed to make it as smooth as they have is truly impressive. You'll know when it's switched to airplane mode because the whole aircraft will jerk a little bit. The best way I've found to minimise this is to try to avoid giving any control inputs as the nacelles reach 0 degrees. And that was the Osprey transitioning to airplane mode right there. But now we're in airplane mode, we can engage the autopilot. The autopilot is only available in airplane mode, and it works much like any other autopilot, with the ability to set altitude, speed and heading. But I don't like to use autopilot very much. I tend to do flight sims because I like to fly, not watch the computer fly. And as we're not doing a long haul flight, let's just turn it off and do something fun. The Osprey isn't limited to vertical takeoffs and landings. If you're carrying a heavy load or you just need to land quickly, you can do a short rolling landing. Just as long as the nacelles are at least 60 degrees, A to avoid a prop strike and B to make sure you're going slow enough to land. But just as we took our time to lower the nacelles to transition to airplane mode, we need to take our time pitching them back up again as we slow down. Slowing down is achieved in the conventional way of pitching up slightly and reducing power. But keep a close eye on your vertical speed. As your airspeed drops, the Osprey's stubby wings won't provide much lift, which means you'll need to bring the power back in order to stop yourself dropping out the sky. And that's our target ahead of us now. Our objective here is to pick the spot where we want to touch down. Then, once we're on the ground, pull back the power and apply the brakes to come to a stop as quickly and safely as possible. As with any plane landing on a runway, you want to be aiming for the 1,000-foot marker, I know it's tempting to land on the numbers, but that doesn't give you a whole lot of margin for error. And ideally you should be better lined up on the centre line than I am right now. As soon as you touch down, assume you've got low enough airspeed, you can pull back on the side click to slow you down faster and reduce your stopping distance. Anything below 60 knots should be fine. Keep your nacelles at 60 degrees and control your descent by balancing pitch angle and throttle. And we're on the ground. The aircraft isn't damaged and we're fairly close to the centre line, so I'm going to call that a fairly good landing. However, in the event of a bumpy landing, rest assured the Osprey has a very sturdy landing gear, and you have to bump it pretty hard to break it. But it is possible, apparently. To take off again, just apply between 80 to 90% throttle. Once you have sufficient airspeed, the Osprey should just lift up into the air without the need to rotate. However, from time to time it does seem to stick to the runway and shudder when it wants to lift off. When that happens, a small tug on the side click should break it free. On this occasion, however, there seems to be a plane coming towards me, so I think a bit more power and pitching up is called for. I have done that takeoff so many times, and that's the first time there's been a plane on the runway. But then I suppose that's what happens when you don't call ATC for clearance. We're now descending towards the city to see how it handles in a built up area. If you can keep the side click and throttle in balance, it can hover very nicely, but keep in mind that this is a heavy aircraft, so when you make a turn you need to make sure you counter the inertia so you don't drift into anything. Like this rather nice and rather expensive hotel, for instance. I stayed there for work once. It's a tough job, but someone's got to do it. If landing on carriers and runways is a bit mainstream for you, you'll be glad to know that this thing can land just about anywhere, provided you have the skill to guide it down. This is San Diego Convention Center and home of the famous San Diego Comic-Con, which someday I hope to attend. And this large roof should make up for the fact that I'm not flying in VR. When you get a bit more confident, you can go for smaller landing spots, or don't even land at all. With some careful handling and a bit of practice, you'll find you can manoeuvre around buildings quite easily. You just need to be confident about the size of the gap and the size of the helicopter. The main challenge when hovering on the Osprey, as with most military helicopters, is that you can't see down like you would with a regular helicopter. This can make judging landings and low passes a bit trickier, but on the other hand I suppose it also makes you harder to shoot. But you get used to it with a bit of practice. And now we're going to finish with the carrier landing. The main challenge here is keeping the carrier in sight while you approach. Temptation is to pitch forward so you can keep it in sight, but if you do that your airspeed will stay too high. The better strategy is to drop down low early so you can keep track of it as long as possible while controlling your approach. Again, do not try to rush this. If it means spending 5 or even 10 minutes just crawling towards a carrier at a couple of knots, it's better than crashing into the deck. And as of anything, it gets easier with practice. Not a bad landing if I do say so myself. And on the first try too. Okay, maybe there are one or two slightly bumpy practice runs. The only thing left to do is to shut her down. If you're looking for a new challenge, then you should really give this a try. It's not an easy aircraft to fly, but every time you land without exploding, you feel like you've achieved something. In all seriousness though, it is a lot of fun to fly. There's some great attention to detail and it's got a lot of cool features. I think I learn something new about it every time I fly it. But there's still one aspect I'm trying to get to grips with, and that's handling emergency procedures. Normally in my reviews I like to include an auto rotation. However, when I tried that with this aircraft, that's when things got interesting. In the next video I'll be exploring some of the different failures that this aircraft is prone to, and some of the methods that I've found to deal with them. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. For now though, it's time to switch off.